Hello, welcome to this curious conversation. And I'm really pleased to be having this conversation with Nancy McNally. My name is Ben Calleja. I'm coming from Whadjuk Noongar country in Perth, Western Australia. And we're talking tonight, Nancy and I, around what true transformation can look like in an organisation where coaching is embedded in that culture. Nancy, good to talk with you tonight.
Thank you, Ben, and thank you for the opportunity. And hello to everyone listening online and to those of you that may watch the recording at a later time.
Yeah, thanks. So a bit of context for Nancy, and I know you'll obviously speak to the work that you've done and are still doing. Nancy is currently principal at Alkimos College in Perth, Western Australia, and has led coaching cultures currently where you are, but also I know in two other schools. I consider you, first of all, actually a friend and a colleague in some ways. We've had association for, I was thinking, nearly a decade or so.
We have. It's a long time.
Coaching and education, although your connection with growth coaching predates mine as well.
It does.
I consider you an educator as well, definitely a leader, but first and foremost, a coach. And I think in bringing all those things together is why this will be I think a valuable conversation to look at how you pull all those together, bringing coaching, leadership, and then education to create real transformation in schools as well. Nancy, maybe we'd start off with a little bit about that journey for you.
Yeah, definitely.
Thinking about your background and various things you've done as an educator, a leader, as a coach, and kind of what you've done at various points there to bring those things together.
So this is my 33rd year with the Department of Education, so a long time in education and in public schools in Western Australia. In terms of my journey as coaching, as you've mentioned, it's probably closer to 12 or 13 years now, I think, in terms of when I was first exposed to coaching. So my background is secondary school teacher, secondary administrator, but I actually had 10 years out of the classroom working at a regional level, supporting schools, and then at a system level working at the Institute for Professional Learning. So probably 12, 13 years ago, as I mentioned, I was first exposed to coaching, and at the time I'll be honest, did not know a lot about coaching, the impact of coaching. And I was supporting schools across a district, about 120 schools, had a fabulous mentor who worked with me and talked to me about the value of coaching, and I attended my first workshop. And from there, it really was a revelation, and I saw the impact that coaching could have, and it resonated with me due to its simplicity as well, which I really enjoyed. So I became a bit of a coaching zealot, if you like, and a fan very early on, and I attended a raft of professional learning opportunities. So if there was a course that GCI was offering, I was there. So I did the intro to 2-day leadership, the team coaching, the instructional coaching, change management, hard conversations. And the more I did, the more I loved, and I could really see the benefit. So much so that I then chose to do the coaching accreditation program and become a fully accredited coach. And through that, it really has, to be honest, transformed my career. And I don't say that lightly. So through my experience in coaching and through having that skill set, I honestly would not be a principal today. So that skill set has been recognised and it has been sought out at various levels. So I have specifically won positions, been promoted, been headhunted, if you like, because of the skill set I have in coaching, and particularly at, now the third school that you mentioned. So it has really transformed everything I do to the point where I can't think any different. It's just in me, it's my way of doing.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's interesting you say that, because, we talk about that shift from knowing to doing to being. And as you were describing that, that's actually what I had in my mind there. You certainly know coaching. I know you do it in terms of your daily conversations, but it's become certainly, part of that way that you approach your leadership. your work there. I was thinking about, and I know Jim Knight talks about this. I was reading reference to it, that difference between surface learning or surface coaching, the deep learning, the deep coaching. And I'm just kind of, what you were talking about there in terms of transformation. I was originally going to think about transformation in a school, but I was just hearing you talk about transformation really in yourself, in terms of that deep learning there. Can you talk a little bit more about that deeper learning in terms of your own self and your own practice for it to become more of your own being now?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I have been to a lot of professional learning. I've got 4 degrees. I did my master's degree, and I can honestly say that in terms of learning at that level, that doing the coaching accreditation program has been the most meaningful, impactful learning that I have done on myself and on my career. I can say that without hesitation. So it's impacted everything I do, to an extent at a personal level, but yes, definitely at a professional level. So much so that, over the last 10 years or so, it is just what I do. I can't lead any differently. I can't work any differently. I can't be any Nancy differently, if you like, because it's just in me. I live and breathe it.
Mm-hmm. So you've recently opened a school, a secondary school. Well, I would say recently, it's a couple of years now.
This is our 3rd year, correct?
3rd year. And I know one of the things that was very much on the forefront of your mind in being a foundation principal for the school was being conscious of how you made coaching in many ways central, or just a key part of that culture from the beginning. Could you talk a little bit about what you had in mind with that? We often hear about the idea of a coaching culture. That can mean different things to different people. What was in your mind for what that would look like as you created a school from the beginning?
Oh, definitely. And in comparison, obviously, to the other 2 schools where I've led a coaching culture, but in a different role. So this was an opportune time for me. I mean, obviously, in an educator's career, the opportunity to be a foundation principal and open a new school and set that direction and that vision from the outset. So I was very fortunate to be chosen to establish this new school that's in the northern suburbs of Perth. We have lovely ocean views, by the way. And I had 1 year to set it up. So as soon as I was appointed, even prior to that, going through the process, I was very clear in terms of what I would want in terms of the vision and the direction of the school. And I knew that coaching would be paramount to that. So I knew that developing and then embedding a thriving coaching culture would be what Alkimos College is all about, and it's part of what we fondly refer to as the Alkimos way. It's the way we do things here at the college. So having a coaching culture where it's embedded in all things in terms of strategic planning, in the reflection, in the review, constantly looking at what's working well, even better if, layered in all of our planning in terms of learning area planning, operational planning, strategic planning. So coaching is actually paramount in our 3-year business plan. So that's our strategic plan, our over the horizon thinking, if you like, down to starting to now look at how can we start embedding it, peer coaching as well, classroom observation and coaching. We support aspirants. We have a coaching element with that. And it's very strong already in our 3rd year as part of our performance and development process, which is basically performance management. We use the full structured growth coaching approach to that, and building champions, getting like-minded people at Alkimos College that want to be in a culture that values coaching in all layers. So it's those informal corridor conversations as well, but it's also very structured and well planned.
Yeah. Just before we started the webinar, we were just talking offline that you were doing interviews today. So staffing for next year.
Yep.
Does that, when you say anyone coming in is part of that, so what does that even look like from the very beginning that people come on board?
Yeah, definitely. And look, when I write my job adverts, I talk about coaching, that we have a thriving coaching culture here, and that you'll be exposed to to that. So people, when they apply and they choose to apply to Alkimos, know that. And I'm seeing that in the applications that we receive, because people are talking about their coaching approaches, and particularly if they have been privileged enough to be immersed in the growth coaching model. So upon appointment, we will work with staff, we will build their capacity. One of the things that we do for all staff on appointment is we do the DISC psychometric tool. So we do that as part of a coaching process as well, so they can begin to reflect on their strengths and look at how they can be most effective working as part of a team. We look at building the capacity. So I know that you have come and done quite a considerable amount of work with our leadership team over the past couple of years, so building their capacity as well to work with their staff. So that's something that we've been keen as well. But what I've found amazing so far in just the 3 years is how easily you're able to embed the growth coaching approach and have those coaching conversations informally. And it starts to be ingrained in language. So the language, for example, when you look at, the current reality and what's working well, even better if, that's not something that has necessarily been driven by me or been directed to be used by staff, but it's something that upon appointment to Alkimos, staff have just picked up and run with it. And it's fantastic, to the point where even giving feedback to students on assessments, they will use that structure. So you can start to see how it's infiltrating across the school.
The title of this, webinar was True Transformation, how embedding coaching across all levels of an organisation can create lasting impact. It's quite a big title, True Transformation, Lasting Impact. I'm just thinking about, in those first few years, you talk about impact. What are some of the signs, I guess, of impact, not only just of application, because you've spoken about what people are doing, and how they're practicing, they're using that language formally, informally. But what's the impact you see in terms of, any positive shift for staff, for students? Is it, are there signs already there?
I think so. I think, as we're a growing school, so it's our 3rd year, but I think we're starting to build that coaching culture. The language is there, the use of the framework in all elements of planning is there. Staff are more cognizant, particularly because all staff, down to support staff, are immersed in the DISC psychometric tool as well. And people use that language, so they're more cognizant of their style, how they have to adjust their style accordingly when they work with others. So that comes out very strongly as well. I feel our performance management process in particular is very robust because we use the growth coaching framework. So people feel valued, and the goals that they are setting are ones that are important to them. They're still aligned, obviously, to the college business plan and to the AITSL standards or whatever JDF that even our support staff work through. But we use it in a coaching approach so that they are feeling valued, that they are determining their will and tactics, if you like, and how they're going to work that way. In our planning, we will use all of that language. So we talk about the will and the tactics. It gets modelled. So you see a lot of modelling of the coaching, even in meetings, for example, happening. So there's still obviously a lot of work to go, because we're only in our 3rd year, and I'm quite excited about our next iteration of our business plan and where we can take it, particularly down to peer coaching, observation, and ultimately my dream would be to have students being coached and students coaching each other. But I sometimes have to just stop and rein myself in, being a new school, because you've got so much else that you need to plan for and bring people on board for. But the signs are positive and they're there early, which is great.
Yeah, great. So maybe let's think about actually some of the other contexts whether you've done this in or worked with. And, I guess one of the positives of opening a school from the beginning is you do that attraction and draw people in. The vision's clear that, as you said, we're going to be a school where coaching is a big part of what we do. You've brought coaching in or influenced a coaching approach in other contexts there where it's been rather new. How do you approach it at that point? Or, is it a different way? What did that look like?
It was a different way. So two previous schools, I'll go back to the very first one. So I was actually my skill set as a coach was recognized, and I was headhunted for a position as an associate principal at this school. And my background in professional learning, teaching, learning, and coaching was recognized, and that was something that certainly the principal at that time wanted to pursue. So that's probably about 7 or 8 years ago now. So it was really looking at how can we start to plan for. So being strategic and planning for what it could look like in a school. So one of the tools that I found particularly useful from Growth Coaching International was a roadmap, and actually mapping out exactly what that would look like and being very strategic in terms of what are your objectives, how are you going to build champions, what courses might you expose staff to, what it will look like, how it will infiltrate different layers, and then having an operational plan each year to then map out exactly what that would look like. Obviously, funding and budgeting and resources to go towards that as well. And look, initially, I'll be honest, there were some at the leadership and executive level that weren't sure about coaching and thought, is this the direction for the school? Is this what it's about? But it's working with them, modeling it to them seeing the benefit of it, to the point where when I left that school after 5 years, and that was 4 years, 5 years ago, that school has grown from strength to strength with coaching. So it proved to me that it wasn't about Nancy and coaching, that they believed in coaching. It's been more than sustainable, and they've taken it to places that I probably couldn't have envisaged when I was there, to the point where they are a school that their ATAR results have just flown, and they are punching well above their weight, and coaching is so embedded. They coach all of their ATAR Year 12 students. It's really strongly embedded across the whole school. So that makes me feel very assured that it was sustainable and it wasn't dependent on a person driving it, which I think is really important if you're in a school. Ultimately, you need someone to initiate it, but it needs to be that coaching approach and people believing it. Because if you were to leave the school, and in both of these school contexts, I left, but coaching is still going strong. There's that belief in it. They saw the benefit of coaching, and it didn't just die when I walked out the door, for example.
Yeah, yeah. I'd imagine there's so much in what you do in that space. It's not just incidental or accidental that's been sustained. I wonder if you actually just drill down a little bit into it, because I imagine people who are interested in this space about really making sure that this is not just another thing that we do, but something that actually is how we are in the school and at all levels. I think about there's different change models, but one of the ones that I just simply think about change and improvement, on 3 levels. It's getting the preconditions right. So what do we need to do to make sure things are, you've got the right conditions, mindsets, etc. Building capacity of people and the practice, and then into that next stage, which is it's embedding, it's sustaining, and from there. And I wonder if we just chunk it down into those. Could you talk about maybe a couple of key things in that, the building conditions part and getting the right preconditions right, in terms of what might be very useful there?
Yeah, I think you have to look at why coaching. What do you want to achieve through coaching? Like, what is your vision, and whether that might be short, medium, long-term vision, but what you're hoping to achieve out of having a coaching approach, and then looking at all the possibilities of coaching. So will you use a coaching approach for your performance management? Will you have peer coaching? Will you have classroom observation and coaching? Will you use it as part of your data analysis? How will you identify champions and build champions? So you need to, for me, the key was being strategic in the planning for this to happen. So that was a precondition, that it had to be planned for and be strategic. It couldn't be ad hoc. You had to be very clear about where you wanted to go. But in the context that I was at those two previous schools, I was also supported to make that happen. So there was a genuine desire at both of those previous schools to embrace coaching, but there was probably lack of capacity about how to
Okay.
and where to next. So that's where they needed, I suppose, some expertise and direction in terms of where to. But it was more important that at the start there was a desire for
Yeah.
coaching. They saw the benefit of coaching for their staff and ultimately students.
And look, I think that's a really important thing. There's a question here from Mark that talks about, can you elaborate on how you might deal with resistance at the executive level?
Yes.
Where there could be some embedded expectation around numerical data and judgments. So how you would, look to impact. You've been in a context where at the executive level, there was buy-in. Any just thoughts though around what you would do with that space?
Oh, look, definitely. That first school I went to, there was someone on executive that was not sure about coaching, probably thought it was a passing fad, or is this the new thing? How is it going to help us improve our results? They weren't necessarily sold on coaching. So for that person, it was a slower journey in terms of getting on board, but for them being exposed to coaching, seeing it modeled in practice was very important so that they could see the benefit. That person being able to be have their capacity built in terms of attending professional learning and seeing the benefit, to the point where that person, who is a very good friend of mine and we keep in touch, has his own personal coach now all these years later, through Growth Coaching International, and probably is one of the biggest ravers about coaching that you'll ever find. But it's also recognizing that for some people, that change management, they take a little bit longer. They might have a black hat, but they need to see what the benefits will be. And when they start to see, particularly when it's modeled, this is what we could do with it, this is the benefit that we're seeing. This person appreciated how it helped them be more strategic in their planning and in their data analysis. So even at the learning area level, holers, if you like, of learning areas would review data with a coaching approach and look at what is the data telling us. That simplistic language around what's working well, even better if. What are some things we could do to improve the data? What will we do? When will we do it by? And so forth. They also appreciated how a coaching approach could make the performance management process much more robust as well. So it took a little bit longer to win that person over, I suppose, and them to see the value. But as soon as they started to see that value, it's, that switch was turned on, and then they became a champion for it, and they're leading the way now, 5 or 6 years later after I've left.
And of course, performance management can mean different things in different contexts there. And you're referring to just those more formal conversations of development with people, goal setting, reflecting on practice, and from there. And so really a targeted or coaching approach to those conversations.
Yeah. So very formal with that, but also this person could appreciate the difference that those corridor conversations could help with coaching, or being able to better engage with those crucial conversations or hard conversations using a coaching approach whilst maintaining the other person's dignity, using those when you say I feel and so forth. So they appreciated that helped give them structure with those conversations as well.
Yeah. So the value or the buy-in comes from the experience of it themselves in terms of how they use it, but also how they benefit from it as a coachee there.
Yeah, definitely. Living and breathing and seeing it in action, people will come on board. So like 3 different school contexts, and I've yet to have anyone say that coaching doesn't work. So yes, you can refine the ways you go about it and always enhance processes, but in 3 school contexts now, and I've supported a lot of schools as well in my different roles across the system. Coaching works.
Yeah. One of in that kind of middle change management process, it is about building capacity, and you've spoken to that, and it's about being strategic, I guess, and providing opportunities for training. It's often also about getting the right structures in place. And I know I've had a lot of conversations with schools to say, look, we want to do this and we know how to, we'd love to do it. We see the value of it. Just when do we do it? How do we do it? And there are the corridor conversations, but maybe more of those formal ones, building in the time and all that. Can you speak a little bit about how you put the structures in place so that it is in there?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, little simple activities I found are useful with staff. So at the start of the year, for example, in previous schools and even at this school, I've done that coaching activity, creating a flourishing 2022. And you look at your rating in terms of your allocation of your 100 points, how much of the previous year was fantastic, good, satisfactory, or poor. So, and then you rate and then you reflect on that, but then you look at, well, what could I do more of to spend more time in the good and the fantastic, for example? And then what are some things that you could do in the next couple of weeks? What will I remember to do? So for me, sometimes just building in little short coaching activities with the staff not even always realizing that they're doing a coaching activity has been useful in schools as well, to immerse them, and then for them to see that you don't necessarily need the formal coaching. So whilst I'm very much, as you know, Ben, an advocate of all of the courses that GCI offer, and I've done just about every single one of them, and obviously where you can build the capacity of your staff to engage in professional learning, you can start small and start having some of those structured coaching activities, start having some of the conversations, because I would hate for a school to think that, in terms of their budget, that it's an impediment to going forward, because it's not. You need to then look at, well, how can I start small? How can I start having these conversations, have a structure in place? And it may well be, for example, in our first year at Alkimos, small school budget tight. So I was strategic about the 2 associate principals went and did the coaching accreditation program. So that was the limit of our budget, and it was about identifying so that at the executive level, we have myself and those 2 as accredited coaches. We've done coaching support and professional learning with our leadership team, but it hasn't extended as yet beyond that. So that will come, but it's embedded. Even though all staff haven't gone off to do a course, the language is starting to be embedded regardless. They can see that it's a coaching approach. We have a aspirant leadership program, so coaching is embedded in that, and the participants coach each other. So sometimes it's just giving people a go to have those coaching conversations and have a go at structuring it using the growth coaching model. And you're always on a winner when they get to talk about themselves and their own goals. That's what I find as well. Staff love it.
Yeah, absolutely. In terms of when we start to see impact, and you're talking about, cultural impact in terms of motivation, buy-in, using the language and that, there's always, I guess, in education as well, looking at some of the harder data and to look at, and I know part of Mark's question earlier spoke to maybe some people who look to numerical data and to see, okay, is there a link between we're bringing coaching to our conversations with staff and to students about practice. Is there a link then, to shifts in terms of student engagement, student achievement, student wellbeing, etc.? And, have you done anything in terms of looking at maybe some of that harder data and link there?
Yeah, look, that first school that I gave an example of, that coaching is very well embedded. They were a school that really turned around community perception. I won't go into too much detail, but they were a school in terms of their ATAR data was relatively...
university entrance type work there.
Look, it was relatively low, and now at the end of last year, it's gone from something like low 60s to last year it was, I think, 84, 85 median ATAR. And in terms of putting that into context, that school is punching well above its weight, and punching at a weight where you would consider that much higher level SEI schools, leafy green schools, are at. And one of the strategies that they will say has had a significant impact on the increase in the ATAR is the coaching. So it's embedded across the school, and the year 12 students have a coach. So one of the staff is allocated to those students who coaches them in their year 12 year. So it's one strategy on top of a raft of strategies that they do, particularly in the instructional space as well. But having said that, their teaching and learning program and what they're doing in the instructional space is also influenced by coaching. So that's an example of where I can see a school has gone from strength to strength, and lots of strategies were put in place, but certainly coaching was one that's made a significant impact on student achievement, definitely.
Absolutely, because as you can say, we can never say one silver bullet has been the link between achievement and growth there, but consistently that's been a factor in that as well. Yeah,
definitely.
Yeah. In terms of maybe some of those thinking about as a leader, in terms of return on investment into that there, what do you gauge as someone who's making those decisions about where to put resources that are limited in the school? How do you maybe gauge that return on investment for yourself?
Yeah, so at each school that I've been at, and obviously I do it for here at Alkimos College as well. So we have our business plan, we have our annual operational plan, but sitting as an adjunct to that is a coaching plan. So each year we have an annual coaching plan. So that looks at the strategies from the business plan, and then we delve deeper into those and look at particular tactics. And we use the language of growth coaching. So we'll actually use the word. So other schools might say milestones or activities or the we wills. We will actually say tactics of what we're going to put in place for that year to grow coaching in various areas. And it might be around building capacity in leadership coaching or team coaching, building more effective teams, or enhancing the robustness of the performance management, performance development process, beginning to explore classroom observation feedback models, supporting aspirants and so forth. So looking at the tactics and then being clear about the will and the tactics, but we actually then drill it down to who is responsible, when, and then resourcing for it as well, so that each year we'll have a plan so we can put aside what we hope to achieve specifically within coaching, when it's going to happen, who's responsible, how much does it cost. So that is actually a separate plan to our operational plan. So I suppose that gives credence in the importance of coaching at the schools I've worked at, that they have separate plans that sit. It's not just one, line within an operational plan or one strategy. It actually has its own plan. So it is about being really strategic, because you do, as you said, have to look at your finite resources and what you can put towards coaching and what you can and you can't afford. And I'll just reiterate, as I said before, it's not about you have to send all of your staff off to do a course and invest in that, and you can still start the coaching journey and get it happening in your school. Ideally identify champions and build their capacity, but you can start slowly and have some wins without thinking that, it's beyond my reach, or it's not something we can afford.
You've talked about in your current context and building that culture from the beginning, having it in your vision, getting your executive leadership team trained and practicing, that next level of middle leaders there. You said next step would be taking it into the classrooms a little bit more. What's the ideal of how you see that working and those type of conversations happening?
Yeah, so we've started that in the last year and this year. So I mentioned before, we've got an aspirant program called Align, which is the Alkimos Leadership Initiative to Grow and Nurture, because we love our acronyms here at the college. So we've had 25 staff go through that now. So coaching is part of that program. It's after hours in their own time. They express an interest to be in that program. They give up their own time. They do modules. One of them explicitly is on coaching, but peer coaching is built into that. So that's the next level for us as well. So we've now got 25 staff who have been through a program year long, where they are participating in peer coaching to build their skill set as well. So we will grow that next year. And this year we have established a teaching and learning committee. So what we plan to do with that is start getting into classrooms and doing the peer observation and having a coaching approach to those conversations as well. So having some agreed classroom observation models, whether it be around classroom management, lesson design, and so forth, and then looking at, well, what will that look like in terms of observation, and then when you do the debrief, having a coaching approach as part of that. So that's the next step for us. Being mindful as well the last couple of years with disruptions with COVID and everything else, and as I said before, being mindful of the context I'm in of a new school. There's a lot happening. There's staff starting, every year. We've got a new build coming in the next couple of years, so there's a lot on. So I'm always really mindful of being needing to think about staff and their capacity to take on more as well, but offering the opportunity. And there's what that saying is, if you build it, they will come. So for example, that Align program, where the peer coaching is part of that, we've had 25 staff who have said, yeah, I'd love to build my capacity and see themselves as an aspirant and want to learn more about coaching and other leadership layers as well. But slowly, as I mentioned before, the ultimate dream, and we've only got year 7 to 9 at the moment, so that's my context in a growing school, so we won't have the full complement till 2025, but ultimately I would hope that we would get to a stage where we have students coaching students.
When you've been in other contexts, I know you've had staff coaching students. Have you been in contexts where you've had students doing that peer coaching with each other, or seen that work at all?
Not in the last 2 schools I was at. I know that is starting to happen in one of the schools that I mentioned before, which excites me, because as I said before, it's 6 years down the track, and they've grown from strength to strength and been able to maintain and continue to build that coaching culture and been able to grow it even further. Because that's ultimately, that's your real vision, wouldn't it be, if you could have the students using this conversation? We do to a very small extent here. So we have a bespoke health and wellbeing program called Anchor. So our students do, at least termly, if not more often, they do set goals. So they reflect on their achievements from the previous term and they set goals. And they're not necessarily always structured in the growth coaching model, but they're learning too. So they start looking at, what are my goals for term 3 this term, for example, looking at the reality. What did I achieve in term 2? What did I do well? What could have I even done better at? What are some things I need to focus on in term 3 to increase in terms academically? But we also look at socially as well, because it is a health and wellbeing program. We don't just focus on their academic achievements. So students will talk about, I need to be more confident or more resilient, or try and make some new friends. So that's included as part of their diary, actually. So they have a couple of periods a week where they work on that. So it's becoming more formalized into the program, but there's definitely scope for that to become even more formalized. But again, we're only 2 years and 3 terms into a school, so we'll get there.
You talked before about, or just touched on, just the different realities over the last year or two, through COVID, through disruption, and I know particularly in schools here in Australia, in WA, staff shortages, pressures on there. What does that look like in terms of keeping a consistency with certain approaches in this way, but also relieving pressure on certain things? Can you speak to it from a leadership point of view, some of the decisions you make around continuing that coaching culture in that space?
I think, that's the vision of the school, that's the direction of the school. So whilst you have the impact of COVID, or you might have a term that, term one in WA schools, we had a lot of disruption due to union directives. So people weren't necessarily meeting after hours. So that impacted bringing people together and having those conversations. So, in any school, whether it be WA, states, overseas, there'll be those contextual things that just happen. I mean, obviously you couldn't have necessarily planned for a pandemic, but things happen in schools and you adjust. But if that is your vision and that's your belief in terms of where you want to go with coaching, you don't let that be an excuse for then saying, well, we're not going to proceed with that and we'll just put it to one side. We'll wait till we, get over this hump, because there's always going to be something else that comes up and something else that comes up. So you just have to look at managing all of those parameters and sticking, with the course, true to the course. But also, as you said, being mindful of where your staff are at and their capacity to take on more, but when they're willing to, work with them and expose them to that as well.
Right, thank you. Look, you mentioned early on a couple of times DISC, and there was a question that someone had put out there about what makes DISC your choice of tool.
Yeah, definitely. I was exposed to DISC about 12 years ago when I first got into coaching. Again, I loved it because of the simplicity. I'm a very strong D, for those of you watching, if you haven't picked that up already. I'm hanging off the edge for dear life. So I just like that it's simple, and what I appreciate is that all staff can engage in it. So we have had our support staff through to myself do DISC. So we refer to it constantly refer to it. So if I flipped this camera around, you would see posters up in my office that have leadership, all staff, support staff, all of my teams, and we map out where everyone sits. So it's important for people to appreciate when they're building an effective team, what are the styles of others, and looking at how they can adjust their style accordingly. But with DISC, not only do we engage in it with staff that are here, I also take that into consideration when I'm going through my recruitment processes. So when we interview staff, and I actually had a morning of interviews, I will look at, do some prediction in terms of, and once you become very skilled with DISC, it's pretty easy generally to pick where you think people might be and think, okay, what's the balance of that current health and phys ed team? What do we need potentially and what don't we need potentially? So for me, that was quite strategic as well. And DISC was very important for me in the first year. So being a very strong D, you do not want an executive team of all Ds. One is enough, trust me. So when I recruited and appointed my associate principals, I looked at DISC and I thought, what do I need? And I thought, I need the polar opposite of me. I need an S. So I got 2 S's, and that was deliberate and strategic for a variety of reasons, because I wanted 2 associate principals that had a very different style to mine. So when we have recruited, particularly at the leadership level, we have ensured that we have a balance across all of the DISC styles as well. We value them all equally, but it is good to have a balance. So I love DISC. It's insightful. I've never met anyone who gets their DISC report and disagrees with what they read.
And so valuable to think about how that just builds that emotional intelligence, that understanding how and working flexibly with others in that way.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So Nancy, just probably in some ways wrapping up, a final question. You are a coach, educator, a leader, as I said at the beginning. From any of those perspectives, if there's someone who is in any of those roles in a school And they really are thinking about that long-term vision about having some type of lasting impact for coaching there. But they're just getting started in that process. What advice might you just give them in terms of how they might influence some of that?
Yeah, I think as I mentioned before, you need to think about the why. So, why coaching? What are you hoping to achieve? Why do you want to engage in coaching? What is the ultimate outcome that you're hoping to achieve? Because ultimately, yes, it can influence student outcomes, and that's what we're all here for. But how do you see it being embedded into your school? How are you going to get buy-in from others, particularly if you're the, you're the lone nut talking about coaching and how it could be useful in your school? How are you going to get that buy-in? But also give yourself permission to have a go and try it out. I mean, when I reflect on my coaching skill set from over a decade ago, I had to sit with the little, palm cards and go through the structure, and it was very clunky. But you then become so confident and skilled in it that it's just second nature to you. And I think that's important as well. You've got to live and breathe it. So, as you said before, I'm really pleased that you call me a coach, because it's not about being a leader and a principal. I will have these conversations daily. I will have them formally, for example. And I really enjoy, in particular, when we have the formal performance management conversations with my team, so that I get to model with them as well the coaching approach, and they get to see it. And even for my staff, recently we had some committee meetings of a literacy committee meeting, a numeracy, teaching and learning, and I did a growth coaching approach to them and said, what do we want to achieve? What's our goal aligned to the business plan by the end of the year? And we did that, and the staff went, oh, that was great, again, to see that model and remind us about the approach and how simple it is. So it's about not being afraid to put yourself out there as well, even if you're learning. And certainly with my two associate principals, when they were doing the CAP program as well, it's like having a go and volunteering. Who'd like to come and be coached by me and see how it's like, and sitting in that uncomfortableness almost of it can be clunky when you start, and that's okay, but then it will just become second nature. And as I said before, you will just think, I can't work any different way. I can't lead any different way. It's just me and the way I do things. So I honestly couldn't work any differently now. It's almost you're in my DNA.
Yeah, it's your way of being.
It
Yeah.
is my way of being, definitely, definitely.
Yeah. Well, look, Nancy, thank you so much for sharing not just your story, your journey over a period of time, but a lot of very practical strategies to be able to put some structures in place so that that impact that we hope to have can be long lasting. And, whether it's people just starting off at the executive level, or they're really taking it out to looking at the numerical impact in terms of student data, it's nice to know that that impact can happen in all ways, culturally and on student achievement. What I've loved most about what you've spoken about is the transformation. Yes, it's in the school, but the true transformation is actually the internal one that we all go through when we see the value of that, and it influences how then we approach things. Thanks so much for your time and your experience.
You're welcome. Always lovely to talk to you, Ben, and hope you've picked up some tips and ideas from those that are watching as well. Happy to share my experience.
Absolutely. And I imagine if there are questions out there, they can certainly field those through our team as well. And I'm sure there's some practical things that you'd be able to share with them as well in an ongoing way.
Oh, look, definitely. If anyone listening, just go through GCI and they can send me your information. I'm happy to share documents that we've put together, such as coaching plans, roadmaps, and so forth. If that would be useful for you, more than happy to share.
Thanks so much, Nancy. Have a good evening.
You're welcome. You too.
Take
Bye.
care. Bye.